Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well. I'm just bringing up the share screen there. Okay, there we go. We're all set. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. It's Rabbi Akiva Males. Today is Wednesday. It's March 10th. We're getting ready for two Parshios this Shabbos. It's both Vayakhel and Pekudei, and that will bring us to the end of Sefer Shemos. And we'll be able to say Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek together this Shabbos. And we all know that's what we're all davening for. Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. We want strength. We want strength to get through. We're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. This very trying year that we've been through. It's really been just about a year. It's been very trying. And Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. We should hang in there. We should still remain cautious where we need to be cautious. But we can, seems like definitely with all the vaccinations that are going on, we're really seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and God willing, we'll get there very, very soon. So I want to share with you some Divrei Torah this week on Vayakhel and Pekudei. I have some from Vayakhel, some from Pekudei. I hope you'll find these interesting. Vayakhel and Pekudei is an accountant's dream, because what's going on in Vayakhel and Pekudei is after the collection that's taken place for all the construction of the Mishkan, everything that was going to be needed in the Mishkan, that tabernacle that would be used all the years in the Midbar, and then even when we first went into Israel, it was going to be used for a couple hundred years. Actually, not all of it, because in Shiloh, for example, they did not use the posts and they built stone walls, but other than Shiloh, until the Beis HaMikdash was built in Israel, they continued to use the Mishkan. And in this week's Parsha, there's an accounting of all the materials, all the goods that were donated, and what was built with it. So let's see something right towards the beginning of Vayakhel. The pasuk says, it's in Perek Lamed Hey, that's 35. Let's look at these two psukim, Dalet and Hey. Vayomer Moshe al kol hadas b'nei Yisrael lemor. Moshe says to the entire congregation, entire community of Israel, saying as follows, this is what God has commanded me to say to you. Take from yourselves, Truma la Hashem, some type of an offering for God, Kol Nadiv Libo, everyone who's generous at heart is inspiring them. Yiviyas Trumas Hashem should bring forward these tributes or these offerings to Hashem. Zahav, Kesef, and Nechoshes. The first items we need are gold, silver, and copper, and he goes on to list all sorts of other items as well. The wording is very interesting there. Kechu me'itchem, take from yourselves. I wouldn't have worded it that way. If I was the one writing this book, if I was the author, I would have said tenu, give. You're having this conversations with the people that you want to donate. If you're speaking to a bunch of potential donors, you don't say, take from yourselves. You say to your crowd, I'm encouraging you to please give. Will everyone dig deep? Please dig into your pockets and donate to this worthy cause. That's what I would say. What does it mean? Kechu me'itchem, take from you. So it's a very interesting choice of words. And I want to share with you a source that I saw that addressed this. And it's Rav Sorotskin, Rav Zalman Sorotskin in his Naim LaTorah. He is bothered by this question, and he has a fascinating explanation based on something, a great story that he once heard. Let's see this. I thought this is beautiful. Take from yourselves. So he says, Velo Amar Tenu. Why did it say Tenu? Give. I'm asking all you potential donors to please give. So Ayin Lael, he goes, look what I said earlier. V'yinei sham lo nemer kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. V'avshir lomer shapniya v'yichu li truma musabos al nisiyim. He says, he goes, it's possible that you can say this is going on the nisiyim, on the princes, or gabay tzedakah, or maybe he's saying it's talking about to the ones in charge of the collection. Sheyichu meyes kol ish asher yidvan libo. Earlier, you can say it makes sense to use an expression of kechu. When Moshe was speaking to the Nisim, the tribal princes, when he's speaking to the fundraisers, he can say to them an expression of kechu because he's not speaking to the audience, he's speaking to the fundraisers. And he could say, yeah, I want you to take from the people you're going to reach out to. Avokan Nemar, but here, who's Moshe speaking to? Moshe is speaking to the whole congregation. He's speaking to the potential donors, not to the fundraisers. So why is he saying, take from yourselves. Who are they taking from? The entire congregation is going to be the takers. They're the ones who are the donors. Why is he saying to the donors, take from yourselves? So he says, V'raisi kushazu, when I saw this question, v'niskarti maisa, I remembered a story. Sheshamati belamdi b'yeshivas Volozhin. He says, I remember a story that I heard back in the day when I was a youngster and I was learning in the famous Volozhin yeshiva, the mother of all yeshivas. Maisa, there was an incident that occurred Begon Yisrael with the famous sage Meor Agola, who lit up the entire diaspora. Maron Rav Chaim Soloveitchik Zecher Tzadik v'Kadosh L'Bracha. The famous Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, who was one of the heads of the Volozhin yeshiva for a while. So he says, I heard a great story about him that will shed light on this. Sheyatza LaMinsk, there was a time that he traveled to Minsk, Lahatsalas HaYeshiva, in order to rescue the yeshiva. They were in dire financial circumstances. So he went there to speak with a number of influential parties to raise funds. Sheshaka Bechovos Gedolim, the yeshiva was sinking with great debt. Sham Nimtzu Beis Gaba Yeshivas Volozhin. And in Minsk, there were two very wealthy individuals who served in the capacity of being the, so to say, figureheads of raising funds for the Volozhin yeshiva in that region in Minsk. Hamuflogim b'Torah, they also were great Torah scholars. Yorei Shamayim, they feared heaven. Nediva Salev, they were generous spirits. Rav Baruch Zeldovitz, the first was named Rav Baruch Zeldovitz. Zatzal ve'Arav Dovber Pines, and there was another one, Rabbi Dovber Pines. I know in Yerushalayim there is a Rehov Pines, and I don't know if this is who that's named after or not. It could have been, it was just a common name, but he says those were two very wealthy Jews in Minsk who were very big supporters of the great Volozhin yeshiva. This Rabbi Zeldovitz and a Rabbi Dovber Pines. Hagon Rav Chaim Soloveitchik Saral Beis Rav Baruch Zeldovitz. He first went to the house of this Rabbi Zeldovitz, V'sipar Lois Matarasbo, and he's explained to him why I'm here, that the yeshiva is in dire financial straits, and I'm here to raise funds. Haskuma Jorosh Hayadai Gadol, the amount that was necessary to get them out of this hole was an incredible sum. Rav Baruch Zeldovitz Hevtiach, he guaranteed Lis Inyan Bedavar that he would take care of the matter. Vagon Rav Chaim Soloveitchik Yashav Lumo Bebeso. So Rav Chaim Soloveitchik stayed as a guest in this Rabbi Zeldovitz's house, and he was learning there day and night while Rabbi Zeldovitz was organizing parlor meetings or whatnot and was doing whatever he could to raise funds for the Volozhin yeshiva there in Minsk. Kavur Zman Ma, when a certain amount of time went by, we're not told if it's days or weeks, Shol Agon Rav Chaim Soloveitchik as Rav Baruch Zeldovitz. So Rav Chaim asks this Rabbi Zeldovitz, Nu, Manishma Bedavar Asifas HaKesef Latzos Yeshiva. How's it going, the fundraising drive here in Minsk for the great Volozhin yeshiva? Vayana Rav Baruch Zeldovitz. So what did he answer? Shekvar yesh biado machzis haskum. He says, I got good news for you. I came up with half the funds so far. That's how much I've been able to secure. So back to the top of the next line. Hagon Rav Chaim Soloveitchik samach ma'od. So Rav Chaim was ecstatic, v'shav elimudo, and he says, okay, I'm going to go back to my learning. So again, he's a guest in this Rabbi Zeldovitz's house. So Rabbi Zeldovitz is organizing this local fundraising drive. So Rav Chaim says, good, I'll go back to my learning. Kavor yerach yomim, when about a month goes by, sholos oshenis, he asks him a second time, Nu, ma bedavar mosar hakesef. What happened with the remaining half? The Yana of Baruch Zeldovitz, what did Zeldovitz answer? Shekvar nimsa biyado kol sakum. Good news for you. I got it. I was able to put together the entire sum. Hagon Rav Chaim Soloveitchik samach simcha gedola. Rav Chaim was ecstatic. V'yatza leVolozhin. He went back to Volozhin. Uparas chovas hayeshiva, and he was able to pay up all the debts, all the bills they owed to the butcher shop, to the grocery, to all the electrical companies, the coal guys, whoever it was, they owed money to, all the janitors. They were able to pay all their debts. Lachar Zman Kutzer, but after a short bit of time, Boan Vim Vashum. So he says these two great donors from Minsk, this Rabbi Zeldovitz and Rabbi Pines, they both come. Go to Baruch Zeldovitz, we go to Dober Pines of Volozhin, Listayen Lefnei Agona based in Varam de Volozhin. They both come to sit for a din Torah in front of Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. So Rav Chaim just comes back to Volozhin, and he's so happy. All our debts are paid off. And these two honorary fundraisers or honorary figureheads in the Minsk community who represent Volozhin Yeshiva, they come to him to a Din Torah. So what are they there? Hatoveya, who was the party that was making claims? Toveya, the claimant, was Rav Dov Ber Pines. Rav Pines, he had a problem with this Rabbi Zeldovitz. He says, listen, we are business partners. Everything we do together, we go in 50-50. But now I found out that my business partner, this Rabbi Zeldovitz, he occupied himself to do this mitzvah. He took it totally on his own shoulders. Hatzalas Yeshivas Volozhin. I just found out what happened. Volozhin was in a massive financial hole. And my partner, Rabbi Zeldovitz, he totally took it on his own shoulders to put the funds together. He didn't involve me in this mitzvah. Who nasan es kol hakesef mikiso. I find out he didn't raise money. He donated the entire sum from his own pockets, from his own accounts. That's what was taking him. What he was doing, he was selling off different assets, and he brought in all the funds. He did not give me a chance to participate in this great mitzvah. Tovea Rov Dov Ber Pines Mimenu Machzis Aisek. He says, I'm here for a Din Torah. Why? I'm demanding half of the business, Hazeh. I want half of this deal. Where else am I ever going to find an investment like this to save the Volozhin Yeshiva from bankruptcy and to make it float again? How could it be? My business partner deprived me of such an investment. When else am I ever going to find an investment like this? I'm here with a check. I want to give half of that bill, and he won't take it from me. My business partner, he totally bailed out the Volozhin Yeshiva. I only found out about it now, and I'm furious. Everything we do it as a partnership, 50-50. And now, when it comes to this great mitzvah, he didn't let me help. That's what I'm here for. I'm just blown away by this, by the way. Like, who looks at it this way? I think most of us would say, okay, great. I missed the fundraiser. I'll be able to hang on to some money. He's looking at it as the ultimate business opportunity. Every investment opportunity that comes, we go in 50-50. And here, what do they say? Torah is the best schara. That Torah is the best business opportunity, best investment opportunity. And he didn't let me get in on this. I'm furious. To me, it's just like it brings such a smile to the face just to even see that someone would go to a Din Torah with this. So this is the case. Now, he doesn't tell us how the Din Torah, how it was concluded. He gets off onto a little bit of a tangent now. Look what he does. Kasher nodal agon Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. As soon as Rav Chaim Soloveitchik is listening to this and he hears what's going on, Sherav Baruch Zeldovitz nasan es kol hasakum hagadol hazeh. When he hears that, 1 second, that Rabbi Zeldovitz, he paid for this all out of his own pocket. He basically wrote the check. So he says, I've just got one question on this whole story. Shola, so he asks as follows, Imkain, if you just wrote a check for all this, why did you make me stick around in your house for over a month? I was waiting because I thought you were running parlor meetings, because you were visiting people, because you were having different, I don't know what, fundraising drives for the yeshiva. So that's why I hung around. But now that you're telling me that you just cut a check and that was going on, why did you make me wait this whole time? So that's Rav Chaim's question. Why didn't you just give me the check the first day I showed up? You're already willing to foot the bill. So I goes, okay, I hear there's a Din Torah. We'll have to solve that. But I just got a different question. Why did you make me wait? Why didn't you just cut a check right away? Al zeh honor Rav Baruch Zeldovitz bepashtus. Rav Baruch Zeldovitz says, okay, you caught me, but I have a simple answer as to why I needed all that time. Do you think it's easy to take a huge amount of money out of one's own account? Yeah, I viewed it as a mitzvah. Yeah, I viewed it as an opportunity, investment opportunity, but it's still not easy. Rabo Samalti, Likhvoshes Taivas Hamamon. I had to put in a lot of hard work to conquer my desire for money, Shebalev Kol Adam, that's in the heart of all mankind, for First, I had to come up with half. My initial thought was, okay, I'll pay off half the debt. And it took me a long time to get over those feelings that I had. I wanted to give it belev shalem. I wanted to give this money with a full heart. I couldn't just write a check. It takes a while to work on myself, to be able to give it with a full heart, to at least get half. After I gave you half, I waged an internal war until I felt comfortable and I was going to be at peace giving the second half of the amount. Hatshuva Barura Azos, this clear answer that Rabbi Zeldovitz gave to Reb Chaim, Iras Einai Beferush Divrei Torah. So he says, based on that story and what Rabbi Zeldovitz answered, getting back to my original question, I think that helps me understand what our Torah says in this parsha. Why, when Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to all of Bnei Yisrael, who are all potential donors, he says, Kechu me'itchem, take from yourselves. He didn't just say tinu, give. He says, take from yourselves. What's with that bizarre expression? So he says, now it makes sense. Sheyif ol kol echad ve'echad al atzmo. Moshe was asking every member of the Jewish people, I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy to dig deep and to give to the Mishkan belev shalem with a full heart, but that's what I'm asking you. Work on yourself. Sheyif ol kol echad ve'echad al atzmo. L'seis trumas Hashem biyad rechava. I'm asking everyone to please work on yourselves and to give an offering to Hashem so we can build the Mishkan, and please give it with a yad rechava, with an expanded hand. Nimtza, it comes out, shekol echad haya maisa v'osa. So every Jew, when they were participating in this fundraising drive to build the Mishkan, every one of them, they weren't just some participant. They weren't just some inactive party. They all had to work on themselves. Since the Torah was makbid, that there can't be any coercion, nobody could feel compelled to give. This all had to be on a free will. That's why they didn't go around from house to house to all the potential donors and to try to persuade them to give gifts. We don't want anybody to feel that they were compelled at all in this process. We want everybody to give with a complete giving heart. It should be belev shalom. So that's why the Torah uses this expression, Kechu me'itchem, take from yourselves. We don't want any one fundraiser. We don't want anyone knocking on doors, making house calls, making parlor meetings, trying to convince anyone to give. We don't want to do that. We don't want anyone to feel compelled, no coercion whatsoever. I want everyone to please work on yourselves. Kechu me'itchem. Work on yourselves like this Rabbi Zeldovitz did in Minsk. Work on yourselves. You may not be able to pay for the entire Mishkan, but whatever you can do, make your own personal calculation. What can you part with and participate in this historic effort to build a Mishkan where God will rest his presence? That's how Rabbi Saraskin wants to explain this pasuk. Why is it that it says, Kichu meitchem, take from yourselves? That's what Moshe is asking of Bnei Yisrael. This is the explanation. I'm asking you to take from yourselves. I'm not going to appoint fundraisers. I'm not going to appoint any solicitors. There's not going to be parlor meetings. Everybody get to work on yourselves. See if we can wage an internal battle and conquer our inclination to hang on to our money so that we will participate in this historic effort to build a Mishkan. And I thought this was just a beautiful story, how he brought it out from this incident of these two great supporters of the Volozhin Yeshiva and what happened when Rav Chaim Soloveitchik went to Minsk to bail it out. But just the very fact that second one, this Rabbi Pines, felt the need to come to a Din Torah and say, I'm mad at the other. He didn't give me the opportunity to invest in this mitzvah. To me, that's just brings a smile to the face. That who looks at mitzvahs this way? Who looks at the opportunity to participate in being machzik, into supporting a yeshiva, to supporting a school, supporting a shul? Who looks at it this way? But that's the way these two business partners looked at it. We do everything together. We invest in everything together. So you ask for my help to invest in mundane matters, and you don't ask for my help to invest in a mitzvah? I'm mad. I'm going to a Din Torah now. It's a wild case. And halavai, all of us should look at mitzvah opportunities like that. All right. I can think of something, by the way. Recently, friends of ours, one of their children reached out to us to, it happens every year. They'll reach out to us when their schools are having a raffle to buy a raffle ticket. So it's such a potent weapon when schools send your friends' kids after you. It's one thing to say no to the solicitor from the school or from the official fundraiser, but how do you say no to your friend's kid when they're asking you to buy a raffle ticket? So it's a very potent way to do it. It works. So I remember, so we bought the raffle, and I said to them afterwards, he thanked me. I said, no, thank you. It's a great investment opportunity. Thanks for the tip. That's what we said to him. We want to try to have that attitude. Now, it's one thing when you're buying a $25 raffle ticket. Now try to have that attitude when you're bailing out the Volozhin Yeshiva from all its debts. That's a whole different attitude, and halavai we could get there. All right, let's see another Divrei Torah here. I want to share with you something fascinating. This is again in Vayakhel. So we're told that the collection went far better than anyone would have expected. And it says as follows. It says, Vayitzav Moshe v'yaviru kol b'machaneh. After a short amount of time, Moshe and they made an announcement in the camp. Stop. No man, no women should do anything more, bringing in any more materials or goods for this collection. So the people stopped bringing. And the work which had come in was sufficient for all the work to do it and then to have extra. So they could, I guess, keep some in the accounts for, operating expenses, or not even operating expenses, repairs. If anything would wear out, that they'd be able to replace it. So this was an incredibly successful fundraising drive in a very short amount of time. They were able to complete their project and have surplus. So I want to share with you an incredible insight from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. This is in his Sefer on Chumash. He says, and the work had come in was enough for all of the work that needed to be done. He says, Bo urei, come and see, Yikaros v'chavivos ha-mitzvah. Look how much Bnei Yisrael felt so enamored with, and this mitzvah was so beloved to them to build a Mishkan. Sharei kama kesef v'zav avanim tovos chedoma nishtaka b'binyan ha-Mishkan. Look how much precious resources they eagerly gave to construct the Mishkan. And look how many months they worked so hard on building it. A lot of this stuff required an incredible amount of craftsmanship, and they lovingly put in that work. And in truth, had the plan gone as it was supposed to, if there would not have been a chet hameraglim, the sin of the spies, how long would they have needed the Mishkan for? Just a couple of months, he says. Had they not sinned with the spies, which caused them to wander in Israel, in the desert for 40 years, in a matter of a very short amount of time, they were supposed to go into Israel, settle the land, and they would have built a more permanent structure. They would have built something out of solid rocks, out of bricks. Whether that's talking about what they built in Shiloh or where it's talking about the Beis HaMikdash. The original plan, had there not been any Chet HaMeraglim, was that in a very short amount of time, Bnei Yisrael was supposed to go into Israel. And that's when in Eretz Yisrael, they were going to very immediately build a permanent structure. So all of this work and all these resources that Bnei Yisrael poured into the Mishkan was for a temporary structure. This really makes us aware of just how giving Bnei Yisrael were for the Mishkan, and how precious this was for them to have God's presence in their midst, even though it's going to be temporary. How many times do we think, if I'm doing something temporary, what do I got to make it nice for? It's just a short amount of time. What do I have to make it nice for? It's temporary. So he's saying, no, even though it's temporary, they thought it was going to be temporary. Nonetheless, they say it's got to be as nice as possible. He says, Hare nimsa shekol yigiyas ma'aserak lekiyum mitzvahs. So why were they doing all this work if it's going to be temporary? Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti v'socham. Because God had said, build me a sanctuary so I can rest in your midst. Since none of us know what is the true reward we'll receive for doing a mitzvah, we have to engage ourselves when we're involved in a mitzvah, even if it seems to be a minor mitzvah. We have to be so into it to the same degree that we would care for a serious, what we consider to be a serious, big-time mitzvah. Therefore, for every mitzvah, no matter what we think it is, no matter what value we ascribe to it, we need to give it our all and put in an incredible amount of effort. Like all these great people of spirit and wisdom, that worked so hard to build the Mishkan. I thought this is an incredible insight. You know, we know in retrospect, yeah, they needed that Mishkan for all 40 years in the wilderness, and then they get into Eretz Yisrael. It's first up in it's first up in Gilgal, and then it makes it to Shiloh, where it was for 369 years, and then it's in Nov and Givon before the Beis Hamikdash is built. So this Mishkan in total needed to stand for hundreds of years. So it makes sense, yeah, that they had to invest that much into it because it's going to be around for hundreds of years. Not too many shuls, not too many structures could say they've been around for hundreds of years. If I know that it's going to stand for hundreds of years, yeah, I'll give it that kind of work. But Rav Yaakov's pointing out that wasn't the initial plan. In the initial plan, had there not been a sin of spies, this whole thing would have been for a couple months. And nonetheless, they were pouring all those resources into it, whether it was the sweat equity, whether it was the financial resources. Why? Because that's for the Hashras HaShechina. That's where God's presence is going to reside. Vasuli Mikdash v'shachanti v'tzochav. So what do you mean? How could we do anything less? That really is it's an eye-opener for us. I want to share with you this footnote. He's got in a footnote here in 8, where remember, because he said that had they not been for the sin of the golden calf, this whole Mishkan would have just been used for a couple of months. So he goes, V'yav shegam be'eretz Yisrael. What do you mean? Even when they went into Israel, Avru harbe shanim ad shebanu bayis. Hundreds of years went by before they built the bayis. Because first, again, the Mishkan was in Gilgal, and then it was in Shiloh for over 369 years. It was Nov and Givon. So he says Nira. So what does it mean? Shekavanas Rabbeinu yishekol ze nigram lamach masachet. All these things. You know why the Beis Hamikdash wasn't built immediately when they went into Israel? Because of the Cheder Meraglim. Had it not been for the Cheder Meraglim, they would have gone into Eretz Yisrael, and within a matter of months, they would have got to work building the Beis Hamikdash. Had it not been for the sin of the spies, they would have gone in immediately to Israel. They would have got to work on the Beis Hamikdash immediately, and they only would have needed this Mishkan for a matter of months. Moshe Bir Rabbeinu Lalon, like he's going to explain later in Shalach. That's what he says. So it's a fascinating concept. Bnei Yisrael put all that effort, all that time, all those resources, all that skill into a project, which initially they thought was just going to be standing for a couple of months. Tells us how they valued this and what the value of Asuli Mikdash v'Shachanti b'Socham, what that value really is. It's I thought that's an incredible insight. Let me share with you one last one, and this is a beautiful idea I saw from Rav Schwab. I'm going to share with you the Divrei Torah, and then a fascinating thing is family members bring out a story in Rav Schwab's life, how it relates to this. And I've seen it brought down elsewhere, and some of his family members told me about this too. I'm very good friends with one of Rav Schwab's grandsons, and he told me something about this as well. I'll share this with you. So this is in Pekudei, in the second parsha we're going to read. The pasuk says, Vayar Moshe es kol hamalacha, that after everything was built, all the kalim, all the utensils that were going to be needed, the Mishkan itself, everything is ready to go. It says Moshe takes a look, he takes inventory of everything that's there, and what happens there? He says, oh, I'm sorry, I just see on the chat. So someone commented that we beautify our sukkahs even though we use it for just 7 days. Yeah, that's a great example. Is that someone might have the attitude come sukkahs time, is that what's the point? What do I need to put up decorations for? I'm just going to have it for 7 days. No, it's a mitzvah. We want to, since it's a mitzvah and we're going to be in it for all the points, 7 days in Israel, 8 days in Chutz La'aretz, we want to make it as beautiful as possible. 100%. We want to beautify that mitzvah, even though it's just temporary, 100%. And I think with the Mishkan is even so much more powerful, because what did they sunk? They sunk gold, they sunk silver. It's one thing to say, okay, I'll make our Mishkan at least as nice as our sukkah. I'll put, kids' arts and crafts projects. I'll make some of those tinsel chains or what I'm going to do. All right, great. But no, for the Mishkan, they didn't just go to Amazing Savings and get sukkah decoration. we're using gold and silver and the finest materials out there for something which only would have stood for a matter of months. But this is also something you're right. It's a good point to remember come Sukkot time. All right, let's take a look at what happens in this last sheet here. So this is again Moshe and Pekudei. Moshe takes a look at everything that was built for the Mishkan. And behold, Bnei Yisrael did everything that they were supposed to, everything God asked of them, that's what they did. Moshe. So Moshe says, I just feel I can't hold myself back. I have to give you a bracha. So Moshe gives Bnei Yisrael a bracha because they did such a great job on the construction of the Mishkan. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says, Vayivarech Moshe, Amar lahem, what was Moshe's blessing to them? Yehi ratzon, may it be God's will, shetishra shchina b'maaseh yadechem. That God's shchina, God's presence, should rest in the work of your hands. You spent all this time building the Mishkan, so my bracha is that it should meet its expectations. The expectations were that you're building a Mishkan for God's presence. So my tefillah is, now that it's built, I see how much love and dedication went into this, God's presence should truly reside in this Mishkan. That's what Moshe says. Then he says, "V'yihinoam Hashem Elokeinu Maseh Yadeinu." He says that that's his idea, that may the pleasantness of the Lord, our God, be upon us. That's what we have a tradition, that Moshe was the one who composed that section that made it into Tehillim later. This is one of the 11 Psalms that we say Tefillah L'Moshe. So in other words, there are parts of Tehillim, while we say David HaMelech compiled Tehillim, and most of Tehillim he wrote, we do say, our tradition has it, that there are parts of Tehillim that were composed by people earlier than David HaMelech, and he incorporated them all into Tehillim, and this is one of them. So V'yihinoam is coming from Moshe Rabbeinu. But nonetheless, Rashi's quoting, this is from the Medrash, Rashi's quoting that Moshe's bracha that he gave to Bnei Yisrael was that, wow, after all this work you did, Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will that his Shekhinah should dwell amongst you. So let me share with you a beautiful idea from Rav Shimon Schwab. This is in the Sefer I have, it's an English Sefer of Schwab on Chumash, his family put together. So he's going on our pasuk, Vayar Moshe's kol malacha. Moshe sees all the work that they did, and he says, "V'hinei asu oso kasher tziva Hashem." The Bnei Yisrael followed all the orders, everything God had commanded. Vayivarech oso Moshe, and Moshe gave him a bracha. So let's see what he says. Moshe blessed Bnei Yisrael, saying, according to Rashi, "Yiratzon shetishra shchina b'maaseh yadechem." May it be as well that the Shekhinah should dwell within your handiwork. So many commentaries ask, why Moshe gave them this blessing? Why was it necessary? Hashem had already promised Bnei Yisrael that when they would complete the construction of the Mishkan, his Shekhinah would dwell amongst them. As it says, he said straight on the pasuk, "Vasuli mikdash v'shechanti b'socham." God had said, build for me a mikdash and I will dwell amongst you. God already said, I'm going to do it. So if that's the case, what then did Moshe's blessing add? Hashem already said, build me a Mishkan and I'll dwell with you. Now they built the Mishkan, and what does Moshe say? Oh, wow, Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will that he dwells. God already said he's going to dwell in his presence. What do you, this seems to be a meaningless tefillah. So listen to Rosh Schwab's answer. Commentaries explain, V'shachanti b'socham, that I may dwell among them. What God said means that Hashem would cause his Shekhinah to dwell within the heart of each and every Jew. However, this promise did not mean that Hashem's Shekhinah would necessarily dwell within the confines of the Mishkan itself. Therefore, on completion of the Mishkan, Moshe blessed Bnei Yisrael with the additional bracha that not only should Hashem be within them individually, but he should also cause his Shekhinah to dwell in the Mishkan, demonstrating, it should be tangible, demonstration how they had succeeded in building a home for Hashem here on earth. So it's a beautiful answer. Is there a Schwab saying, he's saying it's not my own answer, he says, so other commentaries say this, is that, yeah, when God said, Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham, that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a tangible, a noticeable a manifestation of God's presence in our community. It might mean that, okay, he'll dwell in our hearts and in our minds. We'll feel God's presence, but we won't actually see it. It won't be something that's witnessable. So to that, Moshe Rabbeinu is adding that additional tefillah, is that he's saying, Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will, Shetishra Shechina b'maaseh yadechem, that God's Shechina shouldn't just dwell in your heads and in your hearts, but it should dwell in your handiwork, in this Mishkan that you built, that it should be noticeable, it should be tangible. And that's what Moshe was davening for. And that's what we all daven for, because yes, we might have a great day davening one day. We might have some great day in our avodas Hashem, in our serving of Hashem, and we may feel God's presence in our minds, in our hearts. But what we daven for every day, we daven every day that we want God's physical presence. We want the Shekhinah to return to Jerusalem, to Yerushalayim, and that everybody should be able to see it. It shouldn't just be something that is experienced and felt on an individual level, but it should be tangible, it should be noticeable, it should serve as edus, as testimony about the special relationship that we have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that his presence is actually resting in the midst of Klal Yisrael. That's what Moshe was davening for. Now, the way this sefer works, this Rav Schwab on Chumash, is that very often what his family does is they bring down a Divrei Torah, where Rav Schwab would often say over on a pasuk, and then they bring down a story from his life where they saw this play itself out. And here's an amazing story. It's going on the theme of, yes, we might feel Hashem's presence, but Moshe's tefillah was that we should actually succeed. But Ma'aseh Yadechem, what we built, we should succeed in having the Ashras Hashchina, the Shechina here. And they bring an incident that Rav Schwab, why did this mean so much to him? Because there was an incident in his life where he spent an incredible amount, he rolled up his sleeves, spent an incredible amount of work on trying to build something, and it didn't come to fruition. Let's see what this is. The young, energetic Rav Schwab, fresh from his own yeshiva experience, this time out, just a brief biography. Rav Schwab was born in Frankfurt, Germany in the late 1800s. And he went through his teen years, he was educated in Frankfurt, Germany, in the schools and yeshivas built by Rav Hirsch and his son-in-law, Rav Breuer, Rav Shlomo Breuer. And after, I guess you would say, after high school, he went to Eastern Europe for about 3 or 4 years. He spent time in the Telz Yeshiva and also in the Mir Yeshiva. He earned smicha, and he returned to Germany, where he served first as an assistant rabbi, and then a rabbi in a region in Bavaria. So here's what he's saying. This is when he's serving as a young rabbi in Bavaria. This is before he comes to America. So it says, the young, energetic Rav Schwab, fresh from his own yeshiva experience, planned to start a yeshiva and dormitory for German Bachrim in Ichenhausen, in conjunction with the Frankfurt Yeshiva. So Ichenhausen was a small area, a small city or town in Bavaria, in one of the German states. That's where he was serving as a rabbi. They did not have any yeshiva in that region. So he wanted to build a dormitory yeshiva that he would attract boys from all over that region, that they could come dedicate themselves to Torah study for a couple of years. And it was going to be sort of a branch of the yeshiva in Frankfurt that Rav Breuer had started. So this would have been the first such institution in all of Bavaria. In fact, in the spring of 1934, after a year's planning and preparation, including gaining permission of the Gestapo, the doors of the yeshiva opened. So this is in the spring. So this is probably after Pesach. The new Zman is starting. And on the first day of yeshiva, Rav Schwab just worked so hard on this for an entire year, getting all the permits, getting the community behind him to support it, advertising, getting the boys to come. The boys are there. The dormitory is there. It's all these dreams coming to fruition. The doors of the yeshiva opened, but sadly stayed open for one day only. On the second morning, all the streets in town were plastered with anti-Semitic posters by the local Hitler Youth thugs against this new Jewish provocation in their midst, and urged violence against it. The local police chief, who was not a Nazi, warned Rav Schwab that the Hitler Youth were preparing a pogrom against the yeshiva and its students that very night. Despite the Bezirks Rabbiners, that was the German name for like the district rabbi, personal plea to the Ichenhausen's Gestapo chief, who was seated between two snarling dogs. You can imagine this, Rav Schwab going to speak to the local Gestapo chief, who's got two snarling German shepherds, one on each side of him. He was told that he had already notified his superiors in Munich that he could not guarantee the safety of the yeshiva students unless they left town before nightfall that night. The Rav would sadly recall how after his meeting with the Gestapo, he proceeded immediately to the Beis Medrash, which was vibrant with the Kol Torah of his unsuspecting Talmidim. One day, it's the first day of the new Zman, new yeshiva, and told them to close their Gemaras, pack their belongings, and head immediately for the train station to make the last train out that day. The Rav accompanied the Bachrim down the hill to the train station amid jeers and catcalls from local thugs, paid all their travel expenses, and saw them safely aboard the train. Other than suffering verbal abuse, none of the Bachrim nor the Rav was injured in this incident. Rav Schwab could not risk the possibility of any harm coming to his Bachram. Much later, so you see what's going on. So here's the story. Rav Schwab, you see how this personally affected him. You could roll up your sleeves, put in tons of work, but at the end of the day, it might not all come to fruition. And he's saying that was Moshe Rabbeinu's bracha to Klal Yisrael. You did so much work. Yehi ratzon shetishre shechina b'maaseh yedechem. That Hashem shechina, it should all come to fruition. It should all come to be. That's what Moshe was saying to Bnei Yisrael. And Rav Schwab, look at his own experiences, why he felt this. Look at this last paragraph. Much later, the Rav would discover that the renowned Rav Yehuda HaChassid, he was from the Balei Tosos. So there was a movement within the time of the Rishonim, around the time of the Crusades. There was a time in Germany that was known as the Hasidei Ashkenaz, that in Germany, there was an extremely pious movement of people who were real tzaddikim, and they were called the Hasidei Ashkenaz, the real pious ones of Germany. And the one who was most prominent was Rav Yehuda HaChassid. And Rav Yehuda HaChassid, he's got a sefer called Sefer Hasidim. It's not to be confused with, the Hasidim that begun in the 1700s. This is much earlier, and this is the Hasidei Ashkenaz. And Rav Yehuda HaChassid, he had a famous tzava, a last will and testament. So much later, Rav would discover that the renowned Rav Yehuda HaChassid predicted in his will, it's actually the last item in his will, written some 800 years earlier, that a man in the land of Schwaben, that's the area where Ichenhausen is located. And you see, that's also Rav Schwab's last name. Rav Schwab's last name, he must have been that his ancestors came from the land of Schwaben. So a man, Rav Yehuda Chassid writes, and he was German. He says, it was almost like people attributed almost to him having heavenly inspiration when he wrote his work. A man in the land of Schwaben, we'll soon see the Hebrew, would not be successful in educated young boys as yeshiva students. See Sefer Hasidim. And he says it's the last item of the tzava. The Rav was deeply moved by the holiness of this tzaddik, whose ancient will became a reality in the Rav's lifetime. So Rav Schwab was basically saying, I never could make sense of it. What happened? None of us know God's ways, but just like he's saying, he's scratching his head. I worked so hard. I put a whole year of work. I had even gotten permission from the Gestapo beforehand, put that yeshiva together. And what was going on? And he basically got some kind of relief when he saw that there was nothing he could have done different. This was like the will of God. And Rav Yehuda Chassid, 800 years earlier, almost had a nevuah, you might say, and was able to see, this is God's will. There's not going to be a yeshiva in Schwaben, in Bavaria. There's not going to be a yeshiva. It's just not going to be. No matter how hard you work, it's no fault of your own, Rav Schwab. It was not meant to be. Fascinating. Let's just see one other source where I saw this brought down. This was in a sefer, a book I have at home about Rav Breuer. Rav Breuer was Rav Hirsch's grandson, and that was the Rav that Rav Schwab went to assist in Washington Heights in Kaladas Yeshurun, who worked so well with. But Rav Breuer had been his Rosh Yeshiva back in Frankfurt. So look what he says here. In 1931, Rav Schwab returned to Germany and became assistant to Rav Yonah Merzbach in Darmstadt. In 1933, he became district rabbi of Ichenhausen, Bavaria, where he had plans to open a yeshiva. These plans were canceled, however, because of the threats of the local Hitler youth groups, who were far more active in this period in the small towns of southern Germany than in the major cities. As Nazi anti-Semitism became more intense, Rav Schwab began to actively look for a rabbinical position that would enable his family to leave Germany. At the suggestion of Rav Leo Young, whom he met in Zurich in the spring of 36, he applied for the position of Rav in a German-oriented synagogue in Baltimore, congregation Sheres Israel, and was elected at the end of that summer, and that's how the family made it out before the Holocaust. Look in footnote 10. Many years later, Rav Schwab would comment that he had often wondered why he had not been successful in opening a yeshiva, that one in Ichenhausen. The puzzle was only solved when he came across a passage in the Tzava, the last will of Rav Yehuda Chassid, in which the author writes, and here it is in the original Hebrew from Rav Yehuda Chassid, Ish me'eretz Schwaben, a man from the land, the region of Schwaben, which is in Bavaria, lo yigadel na'arim sheyizku liyeshiva, will not raise youth who will merit studying in a yeshiva. So Rav Schwab didn't take that to mean his own children, because his kids all did go to the yeshiva, especially once he got out of Europe and came to America. He took that to mean that a man in Schwaben, that nobody, no matter who you are, if you're living in Bavaria, nobody will be successful. Lo yigadel na'arim sheyizku will not be successful in creating an institution that'll get its young men to study in yeshiva. It's just not going to happen. The land over there, for some reason, Rav Yehuda Chassid was saying, is not mesugal. It's not destined for that. It just can't come to be. Absolutely fascinating. I don't know what to fully make of that. It gets to a much larger question about who Rav Yehuda HaChassid was and what credence do we give his work. That's a fascinating other discussion that a lot of people have weighed in on. But Rav Schwab saw in this, as many others have, is that Rav Yehuda HaChassid seemed to have some degree of divine inspiration in what he was writing around that time of the Balei Tosfos, and he definitely seems to have been saying here, it's just not going to happen. So Rav Schwab found some kind of solace in this, saying, it was no fault of my own, it wasn't meant to be. And Rav Yehuda HaChassid saw it. He could somehow feel about that region, about that land, that was never going to be Mesugal, it was not going to have a yeshiva there. And that's what he found. But anyhow, be that as it may, that Rav Schwab used that own personal experience to explain the tefillah of Moshe, why Moshe felt the need to give this bracha to Bnei Yisrael, that Yehi Ratzon shetishra shechina b'maaseh yedechem, that God willing, he should allow his shechina, allow his presence to rest in what you've put so much work into. Because Rav Schwab saying, I know what that feels like. I know that frustration of putting so much work, putting so much effort. Imagine how much went into that to open that yeshiva, have all those students, all the fundraising, the recruiting, everything, and have all the logistics that was necessary. Probably had a meal plan put together, everything for a yeshiva that didn't even last one complete day. Absolutely amazing. Based on that, Rav Schwab says, now I could explain what was Moshe Rabbeinu, what was his bracha to Klal Yisrael. I thought that was amazing. All right, I'm going to unmute here. I'll stop the recording.